Ah, the evolution chapter. You know the one. For so many of us, it's that one part of the textbook that just feels, well, impossible. It's so important for your board exams, and it's absolutely essential for NEET, but all the concepts can feel so tangled up. Today, we're going to fix that. We are going to untangle everything, from Darwin's famous finches all the way to modern DNA, so it all finally clicks into place.
So, let's be real. Why does this chapter feel so incredibly hard sometimes? I'm sure you know that feeling. You're staring at the page, reading the same paragraph for what feels like the 10th time, and the words just aren't sticking. You are definitely not alone in this, and, there's actually a pretty good reason for it.
I'm willing to bet these are the exact spots that always trip you up, right? Trying to nail down the actual difference between what Lamarck was saying versus Darwin. Or that moment you're trying to remember, wait, is homologous the one with the same function or the same structure? And then, just when you think you're getting the hang of it, the Hardy-Weinberg equation shows up and you just kind of want to close the book. Sound familiar? Don't worry, we've all been there.
Now here's the thing. The problem isn't you, it's all about how the information is presented. Your textbook can feel like this long, random list of disconnected facts. But that's not how our brains learn things. Our brains are wired for stories. We need a single, logical narrative that connects all the dots. And that's exactly what we're going to build today. We're going to tell the story of evolution.
So let's start at the beginning of this whole story with the main character, Charles Darwin. His core idea, natural selection, is the foundation for everything else we're going to talk about. And it all started with a pretty simple observation he made on a trip. Picture this. Darwin is out in the Galapagos Islands, and he starts noticing something really interesting about the finches there. On islands where the main food was tough, hard seeds, the finches had these thick, powerful beaks, perfect for cracking them open. But on other islands, where they ate insects, their beaks were thin and pointy. It was this huge light bulb moment for him. He realized the birds weren't just randomly different. They had perfectly adapted to survive in their specific little world. And that observation led to his whole theory of natural selection, which we can break down into 5 really simple steps. First up, you've got variation. In any group of animals, there are just natural differences. Step 2, there's a struggle for existence. There's not enough food or resources to go around for everybody. So that leads to step 3, survival. The ones who have a helpful variation, the fittest, do better and survive. And this is the crucial part, step 4. Those survivors get to reproduce. And finally, step 5. They pass on those winning traits to their kids. Do that for millions of years, and the whole population starts to change.
You know, to make this really stick, think of it like Instagram. Seriously. You've got variation. Everyone's posting different kinds of content, right? There's a struggle for existence, or in this case, a competition for attention. The fittest content, the stuff that people love, goes viral. And what happens next? The people who made the viral posts get more followers and post more of that same kind of stuff. It's the exact same principle, just playing out with memes instead of finch beaks.
So here's the most important point, and this is a perfect definition for your exams. Organisms that already have helpful variations, just by chance, are the ones that survive and reproduce better. This is the key difference from what Lamarck thought. Lamarck's idea was that giraffes got long necks because they were actively stretching for leaves. But Darwin's insight was, no, some giraffes were just born with slightly longer necks by random chance. And in a world with tall trees, they were the ones who could eat, survive, and pass on those long neck genes. The variation comes first, then the environment selects the winners.
Okay, so Darwin came up with this brilliant theory. But a theory is just an idea, right? How do we actually know it happened? Well, let's move on to the next part of our story, the 5 key pieces of evidence that show us evolution is real.
I know, trying to remember all the different types of evidence can be a real pain. So here's a little trick to lock it in your brain forever. FHOM-AEM. It sounds kind of weird, but it works. It stands for fossils, homologous organs, analogous organs, embryology, and molecular evidence. Let's quickly go through what each one tells us.
All right, let's tackle the most confusing pair right away, homologous versus analogous. Homologous organs have the same basic structure, but they're used for different jobs. A good way to remember it is homo means same, so they have the same origin, or a common ancestor. Now, analogous organs are the total opposite. They have different structures, but they're used for the same job. This happens when completely different species need to solve the same problem, like figuring out how to fly.
And this slide just makes it so clear, doesn't it? Look at the top row, the homologous structures. A human arm, a whale's flipper, a bat's wing. They do totally different things, grasping, swimming, flying. But if you look inside, they share the exact same set of bones. That's divergent evolution. They started from the same place and spread out. Now look at the bottom row, a bird's wing and a butterfly's wing. Both are for flight, but one's made of bone and feathers, the other's totally different. That's convergent evolution.
And finally, we get to the most powerful modern-day proof of all, DNA. This chart is just incredible. It shows how closely we're related to other life on Earth at the genetic level. Our DNA is over 98% identical to a chimpanzee's. I mean, think about that. Even a tiny fruit fly shares about 60% of our DNA. This molecular family tree is just, well, it's undeniable proof that we all share common ancestors.
So Darwin's theory was revolutionary, for sure, but it had one giant missing piece. He could see that traits were passed down from parents to kids, but he had no idea how it happened. He'd never heard of genes or DNA. That's where the next chapter in our story comes in, the modern update.
This is often called the modern synthetic theory, or sometimes neo-Darwinism. You can think of it like a simple formula. You take Darwin's natural selection, and you add in everything we now know about genetics. The big new ingredients are things like mutation, which is what creates new traits in the first place, and other factors like genetic drift and gene flow.
A perfect example of this in action is the famous story of the peppered moths in England. Before the Industrial Revolution, the tree bark was light-colored, so the light moths were almost invisible to birds, and they did great. But then, factories started pumping out soot that turned the trees dark. All of a sudden, a rare random mutation for dark-colored wings became a massive advantage. The dark moths were now the ones that were camouflaged, and they survived to have more babies, while the light moths got eaten. The whole population's genetics literally shifted before our eyes. That's natural selection in action.
Okay, take a deep breath. Let's tackle the one part of this chapter that everybody dreads, the Hardy-Weinberg Principle. I know you see that equation and your brain just wants to check out, but trust me on this. It's not about complex math. It's actually about simple logic, and we're going to break it down step by step so it makes perfect sense.
Here is the secret to understanding Hardy-Weinberg. The principle isn't describing evolution. It's describing a state of no evolution. It's like a scientific control group. It paints a picture of a hypothetical, perfect population where the gene frequencies stay exactly the same, generation after generation, forever.
Now, for this imaginary perfectly stable population to exist, 5 specific conditions have to be met. And if you look at them, you'll realize they're basically the exact opposite of everything that actually causes evolution. You need 0 new mutations, totally random mating, nobody can leave or join the group, the population has to be huge, and there can be no natural selection at all. If and only if all 5 of these things are true, then the population is in Hardy-Weinberg equilibrium.
Okay, so let's decode the equation itself. It looks way more complicated than it is. P is just the frequency of the dominant allele in the population, and Q is the frequency of the recessive allele. That's all. So if we want to look at the individuals, P squared is the frequency of the homozygous dominant ones, Q squared is the homozygous recessive ones, and that 2pq in the middle, that just represents all the heterozygotes. And of course, if you add them all up, you get 1 or 100% of the population.
All right, let's put it into practice with a real problem. Let's say a question tells you that 9% of a population cannot roll their tongue, and that's a recessive trait. Well, that means the question just gave you Q squared. So step 1, we know Q squared equals 0.09. Step 2, find Q. All we have to do is take the square root of 0.09, which is 0.3. Simple. Step 3, find P. Since P and Q always add up to 1, P must be 1 minus 0.3, which is 0.7. And finally, step 4, we calculate the heterozygotes with 2pq. So that's 2 times 0.7 times 0.3, which gives us 0.42. So 42% of the population are heterozygotes. See, not scary math at all, just a simple little puzzle.
So we've gone through the core story, the proof, the modern update, and we even cracked the math. Now, how do you actually turn all this into great marks on your exam? Let's lay out a simple, actionable blueprint you can use to really master this chapter for good.
Here's a super simple 2-week plan. In week 1, just focus on understanding the story. Go through Darwin's ideas, the 5 proofs, all that good stuff. But the key here isn't just to read, it's to create. Draw your own diagrams. Make a big chart comparing homologous and analogous organs. Then, in week 2, you switch gears to practice. Solve at least 10 Hardy-Weinberg problems until it feels totally automatic, and then hit those previous year's question papers to see how all these concepts actually show up on the test.
So let's just bring this all together. We've seen how a simple observation about birds grew into this huge theory, backed up by fossils, anatomy, and even our own DNA. We've untangled the math, and we've laid out a clear plan. So to end, I want to leave you with this question.
Where do you see evolution happening, right now? Because it's not just some old chapter in a textbook. Think about bacteria becoming resistant to our antibiotics, or how new virus strains are constantly popping up. Evolution is happening all around us, all the time.